when we get caught in comparison, it generally is around those negatives. Where am I not measuring up and this person is? And especially if you're in a place where there's a hierarchical standard. And so there is someone who's a position or multiple positions above you. You're seeking to get into any of those positions. All right, where do I need to uplift in order to get into a position that I desire? And so there's a training that occurs there where you're constantly comparing and comparing and comparing. And so it's competition, driving comparison, driving behavior that gets us caught into a cycle. And it's not like we just step out of work and suddenly that just goes away because we cross that threshold in order to go into our social life or our family life. These are learned behaviors that the inner critic picks up on. And it's like, oh, if I apply that there, then I apply it here in my social circumstances and I apply it here in my family circumstances. There's got to be a hierarchy everywhere I go. So where do I measure up? Where do I fit in? And I start to compare myself there. And so we don't take the step back to relax. We get caught in that comparison constantly everywhere we go. Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast, where our heart and our mind align. I'm your host, Amber, and I'm here with Austin as we continue on our epic saga to silence our inner critic. Our focus over these past several weeks has been on really getting in and understanding our inner critic so we can shut it down, silence it, and find our inner champion, that inner hero that allows us to be the hero of our own life story. Now, if you haven't had the opportunity to see any of our past episodes, now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel so you can go back, watch the previous ones, and never miss an episode going forward in this wonderful tale that we are traveling down together. But today, what we're going to focus on is our starter kit. We've talked about a few tools, what we're calling our superpowers, in our starter kit to really get us going down this journey that we're on. Because with most things, if we have that initial kit, that initial foundational flow that helps us, we can always go back to it. You can kind of think about it like if you do makeup like me, you have your foundational brushes that you always use. Or if you're a DIY kind of person and you repair things in your home, you have kind of that basic kit that has your hammer and your screwdriver and those types of things that you always go to. Well, this is the same. It is your DIY kit for really getting in there and silencing the inner critic. So this tool that we're adding to it, or this superpower, is all around what to do when you get caught in comparison. Something that I know a lot of us end up doing because it's one of those programmed things. So I have a client who has been so kind and allowed me to include one of their stories in the book so that we can find ways to kind of see ourselves reflected in these stories. So we're going to talk about some of the things that Sarah, not her real name, we changed her name for the sake of just keeping her confidence, but some of the things that Sarah navigated as she found herself caught in comparison throughout a lot of our initial discussions. So Austin, I'm going to pull you in on this because you knew Sarah, and you still know Sarah to this day. And you know some of the things that she navigated as she went through her hero journey inside and was really caught in that comparison journey. And we share our stories in this too. It's not like it was just Sarah. I've done it. You've done it. A lot of our friends have done this. And so it's a great playing field for that inner critic to kind of jump in and have us looking outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But where Sarah found her focus was in her career, and always looking outside and comparing herself to others in her career, because she felt like she was aging and not getting as far in her career as she desired to be. And she was looking at other people and how they were getting accolades and how they were stepping up. And it was like, well, what about me? Shouldn't I already be there? But I don't know if I desire to be there, but I should be there. And constantly comparing herself to her friends who she felt were achieving more than she was, or to other people at work who were speaking at meetings and things and were always up in front. And so she would look at them and just kind of almost in an envious way. But then when we would sit and discuss, it was like, well, is that what you desire to do? And she couldn't figure out if it was what she desired to do. But at the same time, there was just this almost angst and anger that she wasn't doing it. And she couldn't figure out that divide, what we call that gap in her. Like, why was this happening? And it wasn't until one day she was sitting in a meeting and she used this technique where she put herself in someone else's shoes and was like, wait a second, if I'm sitting here and I'm actually comparing myself, and I can do this in a positive way instead of a negative way, instead of feeling envious of this person, what if I put myself in their shoes? And I thought, well, what if I was the one up there and someone was looking up to me? And it finally dawned on Sarah, like, look, there is someone who looks up to me. My niece looks up to me like this. She's always asking me how to be more like me. Where do I get my clothes? Where do I get my hair done? How did I learn the things that I learned? How did I learn how to cook like this? I'm only now realizing that she's looking to me like I'm looking to this individual right now, which means that I need to begin to be that positive reflection that I desire to be in the world so that she can see that. Here I am so caught up in my inner critic making me jealous of everyone around me that I'm neglecting being the positive reflection that I want the people who are looking toward me for guidance to be. And that's what happens when we get so caught up in comparison. And I was like, that story for me, even though it was one that I was assisting Sarah through, to this day, it's one that I still reflect back to when I get caught in comparison. Because I'm like, yeah, if I'm so busy looking outward and getting so caught up in the negative, and comparing myself, what am I teaching other people, not only about me, but how to respond and be in that kind of a moment?
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to have a little bit of context before we dive in, and summarizing that story is really key. And I think a lot of people can connect with this. Sarah is very smart, capable, kind, and a powerful woman on her own, right? And so it's like, I think some people would see her and be like, wow, what is she doing comparing? And I think that works for a lot of people, right? And so I think it humanizes all of us in a lot of ways, because one, it's in many ways we're kind of, it's natural for us to look outside of ourselves to help us understand who we are, right? We've talked about this in the origin aspect. Yeah. But not all external to internal is negative. And I think that was a key factor that you and Sarah together are bringing forward in this. And I think I can't wait to really dive into this more today, because it's important to understand where the inner critic can step in, and it can be negative, but there is this fine line that it kind of wiggles on, right? And it's like, which way is it going to fall? And so if it really does fall towards the negative, it can really transform how we view ourselves. We can definitely get caught in that comparison. We can lose ourselves through that process. And that's something I know I've struggled with in many aspects of my life, for a long period of time in my life. And so, but however, there's a beauty in comparison. There's a way to understand in reverence, in connection. When you see that this person is, someone else is in many ways you in another way, right? And that's that unity and that oneness. So when we can see ourselves in someone else, that gives us that light, that opportunity to recognize what's possible within ourselves. And so I think that's something that is a unique expression of comparison that we can really explore today.
Yeah. Well, it creates that bond, and immediately, even if all we're doing is seeing the piece of our soul reflected, that beautiful humanity to humanity, then there's immediately a heart connection that begins to happen. Otherwise, we're so caught up in our thoughts, right? And that is where that inner critic lives. We don't hear the inner critic in our heart. We don't feel like critical of someone else when we're loving them. We think critical thoughts about ourselves and other people. And so the thoughts are just racing in our brain and racing and racing, or in our mind. We might have visceral feelings in our body when we're being critical. I don't desire to take that away. They're like visceral feelings. But if you're feeling into love and into the likeness, then rarely are you being critical of someone. You're being compassionate. You're feeling that connection. And if you're seeing a part of yourself in them, even if it's a part that you don't like, it's like, oh yeah, I might not like that part of me being reflected back in you, but I can at least feel the bond in that, and the unity in that. And now you're not criticizing it, you're connecting in it. And that is such a strong, like, okay, so let's lift that up together then. Let's not sit in it, let's lift it up together, is something you can do. So I love that point.
Definitely. I mean, comparison is the bridge to adoration. And admiration is what I meant to say. And so there is beauty in it. There is, as you're saying, connection and heart. And I think I really like to reiterate what you just said, just so it can really sit with all of us here. That inner critic is in the head, and true connection is in the heart. And so and I think that's the difference. If we want to view comparison from a place of positivity and love and connection, then we have to feel comparison from the heart and not overthink it. If we're overthinking of it, then that gets into the inner critic. So I love that. Thank you for bringing that forward.
And that's what I feel Sarah did so well, because she was, for the longest time, like analyzing it to the point of, why is that not me? Why is that not me? And then when she finally got to the point of, well, that is me, just in a different way, then it was that feeling of comparison for connection versus comparison from ego.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And she became the reflection, and she really took the time to understand how that really occurred. And so it allowed her to visualize how she desired to show up in the world. And when the inner critic still popped up, because it does and it will, then she had the opportunity to use some of the other tools in her starter kit to be able to look at and observe the inner critic and say, I hear you, but not today, like not right now. I understand that I'm having these feelings, but it is not right now, right? And so it allows you to move through and find something that you connect with and that you care about, and allow you to feel your way through what is occurring inside, but not allow that to seep through and become the reflection outside of you. And there's some strength in that, right?
There's a lot of strength in that. Absolutely. It's embodying our inner critic is it can feel very natural, and it's almost easy to slip in.
Yeah.
And so we have to, there's a lot of effort to hold that back and not get caught up in our thoughts and pull into the heart and be connected. There's a conscious expression. But it's funny because the more that we do that, the more natural that actually is, because we are, I feel, first and foremost, first nature is our heart. You know, we say, oh, something's second nature. That's because we've practiced it and we've thought about it in our head a lot.
Yeah.
But first nature is heart. And so we naturally desire to connect. We naturally desire to be heart to heart and see ourselves in another. And so unfortunately, just our society just isn't set up that way. And so we've been taught more second nature, and then taught habits to reinforce, negative habits to reinforce through the second nature, instead of creating positive habits to reinforce through the first nature.
Right. And it goes back to the negative brain bias, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that it is very easy for us to hold on to the negative and allow the positive to just slide right off. Just goes. And so you put yourself into a work environment where it is high pressure, high stress oftentimes, and it creates that quick to hold on to and internalize that negative, right? And so when we get caught in comparison, it generally is around those negatives. Where am I not measuring up and this person is? And especially if you're in a place where there's a hierarchical standard, right? And so there is someone who's a position or multiple positions above you. If you're seeking to get into any of those positions, then you're constantly, all right, where do I need to uplift in order to get into a position that I desire? And so there's a training that occurs there where you're constantly comparing and comparing and comparing. And so it's competition, driving comparison, driving behavior that gets us caught into a cycle. And it's not like we just step out of work and suddenly that just goes away because we cross that threshold in order to go into our social life or our family life, right? These are learned behaviors that the inner critic picks up on. And it's like, oh, if I apply that there, then I apply it here in my social circumstances, and I apply it here in my family circumstances. There's got to be a hierarchy everywhere I go. So where do I measure up? Where do I fit in? And I start to compare myself there, and I start to compare myself there. And so we don't take the step back to relax. We get caught, as we said, we get caught in that comparison constantly everywhere we go. And so we have to flip that script, and we have to reflect and say, how am I in a different circumstance? Mindfully look and say, how am I in a different circumstance? Am I taking behaviors from one space and applying them in another space? Am I being a reflection in a space that is not a space where I should be that reflection? Or is it that maybe we have created the same hierarchical structure in our friends group and we don't need to? So how can I be the change I desire to see in this group? How can I be the first one to lead the charge to change this? And those are things that are very much in that starter kit, because the environment you surround yourself in is what will start to create the experiences that you have.
Beautiful questions. And yeah, the starter kit is key. And I think it's another tool to help us understand a fundamental aspect that I feel creeps into this and convolutes this understanding. And I think it's from a passage from our other book, Opportunities for Expansion, and that's judgment versus assessment.
Yeah.
It's we kind of, as a society, have been really caught into judgment, judging ourselves. We judge ourselves, so we judge others. We judge others, so we judge ourselves, and it becomes a cycle. But what's the difference between judging and assessing, right? And that's really a core question to ask, and that can help us understand how to effectively compare without getting caught in the head and being more connected in the heart. And so when we're judging, we're putting ourselves and or others down. When we're assessing, it's more objective. It's a measuring point. And feel free to elaborate on this at any point. But that's really key, because if we want to look at comparison from that positive light, we can see someone outside of ourselves, and that can give us that positive, like, hey, I see what they're doing. They're an amazing public speaker. Or, in Sarah's case, this person was really, really great at giving presentations and talking in front of a group of people. And like, man, I want to do that like that. Or do I want to do that? And that was part of the question, right? But let's assume for the sake of this is hey, I want to do that, right? So instead of judging them and judging ourselves, like if I wanted that and I said, man, like I want to be a great public speaker, and like, man, I suck, I'm terrible, I'm not good. Now I'm starting to judge myself instead of assess the situation, right? It's like, okay, this person's really great, and I'd love to emulate and be like that, have that type of skill set. I'm not quite there, and this is the roadmap I need to take in order to get there. So now we're in that assessment, and so comparison in that regard is turning into a positive to help me grow as a person. And so that takes away competition, that takes away all these things that can really pull us down and start to overthink, and all the energy we would have spent on judging and the negative comparison and the inner critic and all the other stuff that's going on, pulling us down, pulling others down. What if we redirected all of that energy into our own personal growth through that assessment, recognizing that, hey, that's admiration, that's reverence, and that's love to recognize someone for the skill set that they've developed, and to help me understand that, hey, I can do that too. And that's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. And that's where the part where Sarah realized that her niece looked up to her the way she was looking up to the individual who was speaking, played a key role, because it goes back to who you surround yourself with, right? Mm-hmm. And what we discussed was find that gentleman, ask him if he's willing to be your mentor in the office, and help you gain the skills, as you just said, to get to where you desire to be in that particular skill set. He has the skills you desire. He can help you acquire them quicker if you're willing to ask him to. Simultaneously, if you are willing to teach your niece, you can practice the skills that he's teaching you while teaching someone else. So everyone levels up.
Boom. Beautiful.
And the inner critic gets shackled, silenced. Of course, it's going to keep attempting to say, well, you didn't do that part right, and you didn't do that part right. But you now have all of this strength because you're stepping out of that comfort zone. You are no longer allowing it to halt your forward progress. And that mentor and the niece are both going to consistently feed in all of the appreciation and a positive affirmation. And so slowly that inner critic starts losing foothold, because the comparison and the negative or the self-lowering suddenly gets taken away. And the comparison and the, okay, I'm making strides is what starts to take over.
I love that. It's amazing. And I love that it's lifting everyone up. And I mean, if you really want to get good at something, then learn how to teach it to someone else, right? Because you can't really give something you don't have,
Yes.
right? And so, but when you start teaching it to someone else, then it's like, oh, wow, I really do have that. I think it happens all the time when we attempt to give our, we're looking for advice, around us. And then one of our friends gives us advice, it says, hey, can I get your advice? And then you give them advice and you're like, oh yeah, I probably need that for me. And it's like, oh, I've had it within me this whole time. And so that's usually what all this is, right? It's in there. And these people or things outside of ourselves can be beautiful markers to let us know where we desire to direct what's within us already and level up.
Yes. And the confidence that begins to come from that. And Sarah's niece gained so much from the entire flow and process. And in many ways, it was preparing Sarah for so many things that continue to unfold in her life. So many things. But at the time, she had no clear vision of what that was. She was very caught in that inner critic, to the point that it was beginning to shut her down in many ways. And there are so many of us who are in that position where, in our last podcast, we talked about frozen by fear, right? Not only are we frozen by fear, but we're physically frozen by illness and how the inner critic is beginning to wear on our physical form, because we're just either mentally, we've become so hard on ourselves that we're depressed and we don't believe in our capabilities any longer, or we've just had so many stress hormones released that our blood pressure's through the roof. There are all these factors that begin to play, and it is sincerely time for us to do something more about that. And that's why we're so dedicated to really getting this out there and helping people.
Yes. Well said, my love. Very well said. You should write a book.
Go figure. So you had mentioned that there were times you were caught in comparison, and we say one of the best ways to learn is through our own personal experiences and sharing those with others. So I'll share mine if you share yours.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was through my whole life. I feel like me being an only child kind of presented a unique case for me to look outside of myself, because I didn't have, I don't know what it's like to have, to live with siblings in that way. And so that's kind of maybe a different style of comparison, but it wasn't direct in my space, and so the only, I could either look to my parents, which are great examples, or I could look to my peers. And so, growing up, especially when I became into high school and college, and seeing what the world around me was like, and as I expanded my friend group and expanded who I thought I should be, I spent a lot of time comparing, being like, oh, I see what that person does. Like, I want to be like them, and them, and them, and them, and them. And it was like all these different things. And I'd even look at, whether it's celebrities or professional golfers or, just people who have made an impact. And so I was attempting to pull the very best out of each and every one of them, which again, the intention was good. Like it really was. I just didn't realize the fault behind it. And sadly, through that process of constantly being in my inner critic, being disconnected from my heart, I realized how disconnected from who I am I was becoming. And so I was creating a separation. And I think that's one of the big issues that comparison can create when you're not being conscious of your comparing. Comparison. Yeah. However that is. But if you're not being conscious of the way that you compare, Maybe let's put it that way. And so, yeah, I was creating a very strong separation, an illusion of separation, but still it was a very felt separation. And so I lost who I was, who I am, and was attempting to take on all these different parts of other people who, although all on their own are amazing individuals in the way that they do things, but the reason why they are them is because they are them and I'm me, and that's different. And so it doesn't mean I couldn't enjoy some of the skills or say, wow, that's an area, like, man, this person, I see how great at golf they are, for example. What are they doing? Like, how are they that good? Are they sitting practicing for 9 hours? Are they visualizing? What are the things that they're doing? Or if this person was social, okay, great. Like, I really looked up to a couple friends that were very, very naturally social and very magnetic. And so I was like, wow, I want to like attract people like that. That's so cool. Like, it's like immediately, like, you meet them and they're the best friends, like everyone around them, and they have something in common with everyone. That's so cool. Like, coming from an only child, like, that's, oh, like, I want to be best friends with everyone. Like, that's nice. That sounds fun, right? But I just didn't realize, again, that I was, through that process, how disconnected I was, and I was being someone else to everyone else. And so no one actually got to know me. They had an illusion of me. And then I started getting tripped up on who I was to other people. And then to a point where it got so much that it was like, they're like, you're just acting like a completely different person. And to their eyes, I definitely was, because I forgot who I was to that person. And I thought I was, I wanted to be a best friend to each person and be there for them in the way that they, I thought they wanted them to be. But again, I didn't realize how egotistical that was. It was stemmed from my ego, from my own projection of what I thought they wanted from me, instead of just being who I am. The initial connection was that they wanted to get to know me, and then I completely denied that opportunity. And I would say the same would go for anyone else. Someone, when I meet someone, like, I want to connect with who they are, not who they think I want them to be, because then I'm denied who they are. And who they are, who everyone is a beautiful, beautiful gift to this world. And so that's just something that we can all start to take, kind of what you're talking about this in comparison, recognize the growth aspects, the skills aspects, and flourish in a way that we both not only knew was possible, but at the same time, the gnosis is very possible because coming from inside. It's like unlimited potential being tapped from the soul. And so that's been the shift over the years into that. And it's beautiful because it's a place of abundance. And I still see others, like I learn from you every day, like different ways that I can grow. And it's like, man, like, wow, Amber, just the way that she holds such love and connection and the capacity to embody such love. Seriously, it like blows my mind every day. So I have to get out of my head and back into my heart and be like, man, okay, how do I want to continue to be that? Like, that inspires me. And so I desire to be that as well. And then that becomes a beacon, just like yours has been a beacon to me. And so it becomes this beautiful thing in a cycle that, as you said, lifts everyone up. And so, yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit with the story.
I feel so. And do you find that you still compare yourself?
Yeah.
Even now with all of and I just want to put it out there, like, we have been, like, you and I have been on this journey together. We're celebrating 9 years on this journey together. The first time you walked through a door where I met you. So 9 focused years of this journey. And do you find you still have moments of comparison where the inner critic steps in? And it's not as though it's just like, bam, I see you, inner critic. Or does the inner critic get its moment before you recognize?
Absolutely. I mean, this isn't a permanence. This is a practice. And so 100%. I mean, there's the difference is that from now and before, the time is a lot quicker. That's what practice does. So when there are movements backwards, it's not like this giant leap where I got like sprung back, hundreds of steps or something like it used to. Because it was like, I'd work my way up, and then it'd be like, boom, slingshot back. And it's, oh, geez, okay, now I got to go again. And it's not like that anymore. It's maybe like a little, okay, almost like a slight fall, and then it's okay. No, I got my grounding, and it's very, very quick. And I'd say that's the difference of what a lot of practice can do. And it'll never be a permanent, because then I feel it would be stuck in ego. So it'd still be an illusion in and of itself of permanence, because then it's basically what I'm saying is that I would have no room for growth.
Yes.
And that's not truth. I always have room for growth. I mean, the universe is constantly growing. So why would I be any different? If I did, then if I thought so, then I would just be egotistical, and then I'd be in my own illusion of in truth, in a space of lack. And so that's what I feel like is so humbling through the process. It's so authentic through the process. It's grounding. And so when we can be in that, but also give ourselves grace, forgive ourselves. I mean, these are tools. Like, be in gratitude, be in grace, forgive yourself, because we're not going to do everything exactly the way we want to every single time. It's just not possible. And if we did, this would be really boring. The whole fun is learning. The whole fun is experiencing. The whole fun is seeing what you can be in different situations. As we talked about before, it's not about, like, if patience isn't just like fairy dust on you. If you want to say, like, I want to be a person who constantly grows and gets better. Okay, well, you're going to be given a ton of opportunities to constantly grow and get better. And each one of those is a whole new experience.
And in those moments, and I've had plenty of them too, where you have moments of frustration where you're like, man, can't I just be really good at this for an extended period of time? Like, come on. Those are when these tools come in the most, right? That's when you know, all right, I'm going back to that starter kit, to my fundamental superpowers, because that's the exercise. That's the practice. And it's not that, as you said, like, we're going backward, because ultimately that inner critic, and this is why we say it is almost like this superhero, supervillain battle, because it will always be a rising and then another higher rising, because we're going up levels. Mm-hmm. And we're going up levels. And that's kind of the point. It's not necessarily that we're going backward or we're falling in any way, but we like to make it that story in ourselves. It's more, that's growth, right? When you think about, and we talked about the seed that sprouts and grows up, right? We're always going up. We're always growing upward toward our nature, right? Expanding. We, in our creed, we talk about out toward the energy of the universe, however you deem that, God, source, universe of the energy, whatever it is, our soul longs to get that expansiveness, that connection. And this is that movement up. And so there's always going to be that movement. And the inner critic is part of what sparks that. It's like constantly going to point out, oh, you have a gap here. Here you go. Let me highlight that for you. And then we have this opportunity to go, oh, Yep, I see that. Starter kit. How do I repair this part of my inner sanctum so that I strengthen that? Or does it require some of these larger tools that we're going to talk about later? Maybe it's something too pervasive for just our starter kit and we need the more expansive pack. But either way, we're going to know what we need to do, because whether we like it or not, that supervillain is always going to come back to highlight where we have like a little crack in our foundation, or we have a new big gap in something that is within us. And it happens to me a lot. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? I didn't realize that was there. But lo and behold, it's there from a circumstance in my life or something that I haven't been paying attention to. It shows up.
Yeah. So beautifully said.
And comparison is a big one.
Yeah.
Because it comes at us from every direction.
Mm-hmm.
Every direction.
Yeah.
So.
It really does.
Yeah. So if you find that you are caught in comparison, it is something that is very, very, very normal. And it's actually an opportunity. So we are going to provide you with the whole list in our next episode of the starter kit superpowers. So make certain, if you have an opportunity right now, if you're not driving and listening to us, to hit the subscribe button below so you get notified when our next episode drops with all 13 of the starter kit superpowers. Until next time, I need to make certain that I tell you, if you would like 20% off the book, Silence Your Inner Critic, you can take a moment after you hit the subscribe button below and head on over to silenceyourinnercritic.com. You can pre-register to get the book. And when you do that, you get one of our most popular workshops for free. It is the mirror technique. And the moment you hit that pre-registration, it will spark an email right over to you where you will get all of the information for that workshop. Anything else?
I think that's it. Just thank you all for your continued support, the love, the care. Every time you subscribe and you like, that really helps us out more than we can share. And so please feel free to comment below. Let us know how you're liking these. Let us know your experiences of what you've gone through in your comparison journey and how you've shifted from negative comparison to positive comparison. It just helps us. It helps us grow. It helps our community grow. And we can all share together like that. And then we can all lift each other up. So thank you.
Yes. And thank you to those of you who have sent in information. We will have, the moment the book is launched, a community tools section where the information that you all have sent will be listed there so we can grow together as a community, sharing our resources. So make certain that as you register, you keep on the lookout for that as well. Until next time, I am your host, Amber, and I am here with Austin, and we look forward to seeing you in the community.